Are there policies and procedures that are oppressing you today? Welcome to the Daily Devo. I'm Vince Miller. This week we are in 1 Samuel chapter 14. I've titled this chapter A Contrast of Leadership Between Jonathan and Saul. So this latter section of chapter 14 is going to illustrate a sharp contrast between Jonathan and Saul. And a lot of it stems from the very next thing Saul does in verse 24. So let me read it for you. And the men of Israel had been hard pressed that day. So Saul had laid an oath on the people, saying, "Cursed be the man who eats food until it is evening, and I am avenged of my enemies." So none of the people tasted food. Now, just to be clear, nothing in the Bible substantiates or supports the need for a vow like this. I mean, the Torah says nothing about it. This was something conceived only in the mind of Saul. It also appears to be very selfish and self-motivated, as is insinuated by the phrase, my enemies. They're my enemies. Now, this misunderstanding of Saul leads to a great contrast in leadership between Saul and Jonathan. Jonathan perceived the battle to belong to the Lord. Saul perceives it to be his battle with his enemies, a misunderstanding that would continue with him throughout his 40-year leadership reign. And the irony of Saul's vow is that it kind of pressed the people harder than the battle itself. So let's read down from verses 25 all the way down to verse 30. And when the people entered the forest, behold, the honey was dropping, but no one put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard his father's charge, the people, with the oath. So he put the tip of the staff that was in his hand and dipped it into the honeycomb and put his hand to his mouth, and his eyes became bright. Then one of the people said, "Your father strictly charged the people with an oath, saying, 'Cursed be the man who eats food this day.' And the people were faint. Then Jonathan said, 'My father has troubled the land. See how my eyes have become bright because I tasted a little of this honey.'" I mean, what do you expect? They're probably a little low on energy. This guy has a Snickers, and of course, it's going to make him feel good. It's going to give him energy. How much better if the people had eaten freely today of the spoil that they had found in their enemies, for now the defeat among the Philistines has not been great, or not been as great as it could have. As we will see by the time we get to the end of this chapter, this honey was merely God's provision. I mean, that is what God is doing. He's giving them energy for the rest of the battle. The problem is that Saul has forbidden it. But Jonathan, he didn't know about this vow because he was absent when the vow was given. So Jonathan stabs his staff into it and eats. And once he finds out about his father's vow, he points out how stupid and oppressive this vow or this oath was for finishing the great work of the Lord. Leadership is always challenging, but oppressive policies don't make it any less of a challenge for anyone. I have seen this happen so many times in organizations. As organizations grow, so do politics and policies and procedures. But sometimes these policies restrict the freedom needed to accomplish the mission. They might even be self-defeating. In this case, Saul's policy was born out of his need for self-preservation, and it defeated the troops. In the coming text, we're going to see just how this policy led all these people into sin. Now, as a leader myself, I always feel this tension in my life. I feel it in my family. I feel it in my workplace. I even feel it in my personal life. I debate sometimes in each and every instance and with each person how to offer freedom to lead and provide appropriate boundaries that prohibit sin and organizational failure. Now, in each instance, it's a little different, isn't it? It has been different with every one of my children, and it changed as they aged. At least I hope it did. And each staff person I've ever had has been different, and it changed at various stages of their development. But it's not only their age and stage that I have to keep my leadership eyes on. It's actually the motivation of my heart as a leader as I establish these boundaries. And if I'm not careful, I can be selfish and oppressive with them and develop policies and procedures that become oppressive because I'm looking out for myself, which can lead me and them into sin rather than toward God's salvation and success on the other side. And that is the issue of this text. Jonathan had led the people toward salvation, and Saul, well, he's leading the people into sin. So don't lead the people you lead into sin. Instead, walk that leadership balance carefully by paying attention to your motivations today as a leader. And if you need to change how you parent and how you lead, do it today before your policies become too oppressive for others. I love you guys. Pray this has blessed you. If it has, share it with someone else, and we'll see you right back here again.